Hey, what's up? This is Trey Pierce, audio engineer,
digital director,
director of financial planning and analysis,
senior creative director of A&R,
program director, morning show host,
and you're listening to the Springboard
Music Podcast.
It was kind of default to Nashville, and so it's one of those, I can work at Home Depot anywhere. If that's what I have to do to make things work, then I have to be present.
Today, we're going to be talking with the senior booking agent at Jeff Roberts Agency, or in the industry known as JRA. Tom's story is insanely unique. He went to Ferris University up in Michigan, moved down to Nashville knowing he wanted to be in the music business, applied for an internship at JRA, and several years later, still has not left. Take a listen. You're a Spartans fan, I'm assuming, because you went to Michigan State and studied civil engineering.
I did. I wouldn't say I'm an avid sports fan. I haven't kept up with a lot, and I get that a lot when people from Michigan or Ohio will call in and it's like, oh, I must have said a curse word. I said Ohio State. And I'm going, didn't pay attention. That's okay. It didn't bother me, but yeah, that's where I started. Was born and raised in northern Michigan and started 2.5 years at Michigan State.
Why civil engineering?
I was very rooted in math and science as a kid and growing up, and I really didn't have direction coming out of high school. Academics were fairly easy for me at high school. Didn't have to study. There was a lot of math and science based, construction based. All my background was in that avenue. So my parents naturally said, hey, why don't you consider going in engineering? There's a very viable career option there. You're, leaning into your strengths, and without having really a clear direction what I wanted to do. Okay, let's just jump into that and see what the engineering world is. And being 2.5 years in, I just got to a point where I just kind of looked at it and was just like, man, I'm not having any fun with this anymore. It's a lot of work. It's really intensive. At Michigan State, we had a lot of foreign teachers that, it was their first semester in America, and which is great. It was one of those learning curves for me of going like, oh, shoot, I've got to get in and study. I've got to really figure this thing out.
You have to really want to do it at that point.
You do. And I was in, you'd have to go into the help rooms and I'm in there with guys that are just having a blast and just like, look at this exciting number relation. Isn't this awesome? I'm like, no, it's a pile of numbers.
Hell.
Yes, this is awful. And I'm just trying to get through it, and you're having fun. So, I got to a point, I had a couple of friends that were going at another university, Ferris State University in Michigan. And they had just started a music business program. And so I, it was a friend of mine from high school, had met a girl that was in that program. And so I was visiting my buddy, and he's like, hey, why don't you come up here? And, because I'm obviously stressed. And he's like, why don't you come up here, spend the weekend, relax. Went up there and hung out, and then kind of learned about that program. And I've always had a love and a passion for live music. And so it was one of those, just epiphanies of, you can do this for a living. Like, you can actually have a career at this. And was like, oh man, there's a whole program. And they, kind of taught me all about it and I was like, whoa, okay. And so went back, I can't remember when in the semester it was, but at that 2.5 year mark, I ended up transferring, having that fun conversation with my parents, who say, yeah, not so well. That was one of those that came home and said, hey, by the way, I'm kind of done with this engineering thing and I'm going to get in the music business. And dead quiet. And they're all kind of going like, you what? Like, you haven't talked about this before, hasn't been a big thing in your life. And, you have this stable career path. You're, 60% of the way through it. And, we're going to walk out of college with a real respectable job. And it was just one of those that I wasn't going to be able to handle that and be content. And so it was just open door and just said, okay, I'm going to go do this. And, understanding some of the risks as much as a then 20-year-old could understand of, hey, I've got to carve my way. I've got to make this happen. And so I shifted over to new college, starting over from core engineering to core business. I had probably, there was about a year's worth that transferred. So
Yeah.
I always tell people it's like it took me 5 years to get a 4-year degree, and by starting over. But yeah, I started taking 18, 21 credit hours just to hammer through it. But the last 2 semesters, our program up there built in 2 internships. So that was part of your degree, was to go out and intern. Thankfully, they had the foresight to realize that music business, you walk in with a college degree, not too many people care. And
No.
it's, do you know what you're doing? Do you know anybody? How are you going to get started here? Those are all the things that everybody's trying to figure out, and you just kind of need that in. And so I realized, I was going to have to find a way to get in somewhere. And a little bit naive when I got going, I just kind of realized, it's like, okay, I've got to move somewhere where music business is happening. And really that's New York, LA, or Nashville. And I looked around a little bit in LA and was like, man, this is not my speed whatsoever. And, it was kind of default to Nashville. And so it was one of those, I can work at Home Depot anywhere. If that's what I have to do to, make things work, then I have to be present. I've got to be down there in the system and try to figure out how I can get plugged in. And then as I move down and get started, I've got enough to live on for about a month.
Was this after graduation or in that internship?
It was during the internship, but I maintained a good relationship with the guidance counselor, and he basically said go. And I said, man, I don't plan on coming back. I will finish the program, but this is my entryway to get in somewhere. I'm not thinking that I'm just going to walk in and somebody's just going to hire me because I've got some degree from Ferris State University in Michigan. I'm moving down in Nashville and nobody's familiar with the college. I have no idea at the time that Belmont exists, that, Tribeca
Probably
exists.
a good ignorance, maybe.
Yeah, I think that was needed. And a good wake-up call as I'm hitting the road with resumes, and everybody's like, we only take Belmont students. And I'm like, what's Belmont? And they kind of open the door. See that? Yeah, that's Belmont. Oh, great. Okay. So
you moved down, no job. What year were you in college?
I graduated in 03. So I came out, I started in 98 at Michigan State, swapped over in 01 to Ferris, and then got out in like May of 03 and finished up my program down here. So
Okay.
ended up, just completing paperwork of that to be able to file for the, graduation and get the official degree. So
did you do any internships while at Ferris?
No, I specifically knew I was going to need that because up in Michigan, especially at the time, unless I was going to be a venue rep or something like that, and that's really not where I was feeling like I needed to be, the options were so limited. I was going to get, a really kind of bottom end experience because you're just trying to make something happen. And I just realized like, nah, I don't want to end up here. I want to go, be a part of the core hub and not, tour manage for a band that's going to be gone in 6 months or, whatever. It's like, yeah, I could get some experience, but I need to go into the machine and go figure out, my place in it.
So you moved down with like your outstanding credits being your internship in hopes that you would get that while here. That's what I did as well. I moved here, still needed my internship, and I was like, I'm going to get an internship, do really well, and hope that I get a job. Is that similar to what you were kind of thinking?
Yep, that was exactly the case. The approach was, I don't know a soul. I have no open doors. I've got to go in there and make myself so valuable they can't afford to let me go. It was all just street hustle. At the time, it's paper resumes and email was catching on, for some of that, but a lot of it was just, going knocking on doors and trying to get interviews.
After your program at Ferris and going through the music business program, what did you have your sights set on? What did you think that you were going to do?
I knew at that point my high preference was going to be an agent and, work in this side of the world. I ended up getting that experience through student groups there at the college. If I relied on just my coursework, I would have had no idea. Moving there to start, I already decided the live thing was where I wanted to be. Somehow, some way, I want to be involved in live music. At the time, there was probably 4.5% of me that thought maybe I was going to be a guitarist or make it work or be on the road. And the minute I moved to Nashville and went to my first church, that dream was shut
You
down,
noticed it at
crushed,
church.
and oh my goodness, yeah, the first worship team that I sat with, and I didn't even play, but just sat there and was just like, holy smoke, they are 15 years beyond what I'm even capable of now.
I'm really glad that you brought up the point of concerts and bands at colleges, because most colleges and universities are going to have live bands come in and perform, or students who are interested in forming a band that want to perform. So when people are thinking of how can I get experience now, look at your peers, look at your students' activities organization, look and see if there's a place where they're putting on concerts, and talk to who put on that show or booked that show or is running the production for that show, and see if you can just volunteer and get some experience. Because no matter how amateur it is, it's still going to be a leg up from where you are.
We had a concert series that the student group put on that was in our local art gallery, but it completely gave me experience with, okay, what's the booking process? We got to solicit an act, we got to make an offer, we got to get this together, then day of show is this, and we've got to make sure we're planning for how to host this event, how do we tell people. And so it put teeth to all that, of just the idea of like, oh, let's just throw it up there and people show up. It's like, no, you've got to go make people care about it and know what you're doing to jump in. And 50 people in an art gallery is a great one to learn at, because, hey, you screw up, you're in an art gallery. Like, nobody was expecting a great show here, and it wasn't a ton of money involved, but we ended up getting pretty fortunate with the groups that we had in at college. They were just asking insane money at the time for what it was, but we were getting some of the groups that were on the upswing, just released singles, just trying to make it work, but we're just gouging the colleges. I mean, you're paying $30,000 for an act that nobody's really heard of, and you're buying it based on like, well, the single's coming out, gee, we hope it does good. And I wasn't the guy picking the acts, but as we're having these artists in, all of a sudden it's like, well, who's this Nickelback band? Who's this? And so as their first single breaks, we
Wait,
have them
you had
in.
Nickelback at your college?
Yep. They were right when the first single was coming out. So it's one of those, timing things that the organization that brought them in, again, couldn't have timed it better. Three Doors Down was kind of next in line. They were coming out right at the time. And then Train, I think, was right before I showed up, or right as I showed up, that they had Train as their first single came out. And so it was this early 2000s, rock circuit that was coming through. And if the singles didn't hit, we just made an extremely dumb move. Like, we were going to lose a lot of college money there. But, the singles hit, and all of a sudden you're having 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people show up to these, and it's making money for the college. It's not, they're considering the student activities thing a wash. Like, this is good for education, and it's good for events. And all of a sudden we're breaking it even and making money. And so they're like, yeah, keep going. Through that process and going through a couple of years of, being the promoter and being the one, shouldering risk on it. We had obviously guidance counselors and authority and stuff there that were making sure we're not doing anything completely stupid, but, and they're helping through the process. But on the same token, they gave us a ton of latitude because they knew this is how we're going to learn. And here's this bunch of kids willing to step up and make their education happen. And so they gave us a lot of leeway to go pursue a lot of these things without a ton of, control and, intervention. It was just, okay, we're just going to make sure you don't do anything completely stupid, keep you on the rails and let it go. But so I think through that process, I really learned I was not the guy to be the promoter. I would tire out of a certain event or brand and just be, man, I'm week 6 into pushing this thing, and I am so sick of this. Like, I'm already done, and I got another 4 or 5 weeks to go. Or, man, tickets are not selling. I'm not sleeping good at night. I'm not loving the stress of putting this on and that. And I'm going, man, I still love live music. I still love to be around this. What? I want to be on the other end of the phone. Like, I want to be the guy setting this thing up, because that's the fun part, is going, wow, can I get the band here? Can we do this? Does this date work? And that. And so going, that's more what I want to be. So my experience through, the student program let me hone in on the exact field that I wanted to be in. And so when I came down, again, I realized I've got to get in anywhere. Like, I don't care where I start. I need to build a reference chain and, get buddies who know people who can open doors and stuff down here. But my ultimate target's to end up at an agency. And that's where I want to go and what I want to do. So thankfully, I didn't have to come around, try 6 jobs on, and finally find out, like, oh, okay, this is the one for me. This is where I want to be. But so it took a while to, go through that experience in college, but it certainly paid dividends.
Oh, absolutely. So then I'm curious, you moved down to Nashville in hopes for an internship. You don't know a soul. There's not social media. There's not a ton of ways to look up people or jobs. How did you start? Like, what was step 1?
Step 1 was trying to figure my first round of resumes and figure out, because I knew also through my experience, I wanted to end up in the Christian community. That was something that, and the Christian music community here was, again, through my experience of having these artists in and dealing with some of the backstage stuff, dealing with some of the, you have an artist asking you, where's his weed? And you're going, it's in your rider? You want me to be legally bound to an illegal substance? How does this work? And, wading through those kind of things, but then just value-wise, there was reward in doing a good show. And like, wow, we made our money back. We made some money. We did great. The band was happy. People showed up. They had a good time. And then you start seeing, like, yeah, that's it. People it was an excuse to party. It was, it's a very passing thing. And so for me, coming from the faith perspective, was just going, it's like, there's a world out there that's functioning that provides more than just, hey, this was a good time. It's like, no, there's opportunity for lasting impact here from the Christian perspective, and artists that are doing this. So I was able to kind of zero in on the Christian world. And so, again, I think my ambition and my naivety were, running step and step there of going, I knew I had to do this, but I didn't quite know the full cost. And so I'm getting about 3 weeks in and going, like, I'm not getting, there's not an offer. There's not a clear path here. I had a couple of conversations that were going, but it was a lot of like, man, I don't know. We haven't really done an intern. I don't know, and so I'm having to do some convincing. And so 3 weeks in, Jeff called, and
Jeff Roberts.
Yep. The Jeff Roberts had responded to my resume, and it's starting to dawn on me what I'm bringing down in my resume is, up until now, again, I'm the truth that Belmont exists and is the premier music business school at the time is sinking in. And I start to go, oh man, I'm bringing Ferris State University that nobody has heard of. And here's this, I started the second year of their music business, so there's no experience whatsoever. And I'm going, oh man. And then beyond that, there's the student group experience, but my only other work experience is construction. If you know Jeff Roberts, he's got his way of coming in, and he's just like, hey, why don't you come in? Why don't you come in? I got an idea. And okay, sure. And
had you talked with him, or had you just submitted a resume and he just calls you up and he's like, come on in?
Yep, just submitted a resume at that point. Hadn't had a other conversation. It was just you're here in Nashville? Yeah, yes sir. And I moved to Antioch. He's like, huh, okay. I'm like, I think everybody their first season moves to Antioch when they first come here, but
I lived there for sure. I definitely lived in Antioch.
Yep, it was accessible, it was affordable enough, and it's like, okay, well, we'll give it a shot. So moved ended up getting that phone call, and yes sir, let me show up and see what you got in mind. And so he kind of lays out this vision of going, it's like, hey, well, here's what we can do. You can intern in the office, we'll get you this experience, this, that, and the other thing here, and let you go through this. But at the time, his son owned some extreme games that would go out to festivals. And so it was, bungee jump things and, stuff for, middle school, high school kids and stuff at these festivals. They were all, blowing and going at that time and that. And so he's just like, well, what you can do is then get some road experience, and you make your money going out of the road with these. And we'll send you out for the road for the summer and go hit these festivals and that. And I was just like, hallelujah, you just solved both my problems. I'm got my foot in somewhere, and I found a way to pay my bills. So praise God, I'm in. Let's do this thing. So I go down, and I'm thinking like, great, this is exactly what I need. And I talk to my guidance counselor and just say, can I make the road thing my second internship and knock them both out in one season? And he's like, well, heck yeah, you're getting started, go for it. And
genius.
Perfect. So it's just like everything's getting solved here. And so I moved down I was in there in May. I start June 1 of 03 with Jeff. And I think I'm in the office for 2 or 3 weeks. And then I go out, and we've got a string of dates on the road. So it starts here in Nashville. At the time, they were doing a big 4th of July thing downtown. And I'm a Michigan kid. And so Michigan, when I moved down, it's 50 some degrees, and I'm running around in shorts and tank top thinking, oh, this is great. And the lady that's showing me the apartment is walking around in a sweater going, oh man, I can't wait till it warms up. And I'm going, ooh, okay, this is going to be an eye opener. And so 4th of July, Nashville, you're in the upper 90s, and it is absolutely stagnant. Like the air is not moving. And the next day you get on the road, and it's just like, man, so the Lord got me through it and was able to get started. But it's, again, just that naive, not thinking things out, just jumping on it, and glad to do it.
I think a lot of people envision a booking agent, which it is, on the phone, calling venues, coordinating dates, talking with managers, negotiating pay. But what's the road aspect of a booking agent?
Yeah, for us, we spend a lot of time doing exactly what you said. That's kind of more of our day-to-day, but there is the road aspect to us. So for going out for a show for me is to either see a new artist and see what they do live, to see an existing artist and tour, be able to see how that's connecting with the audience, be able to communicate well with that artist, to be like, oh man, okay, I see what you're doing out here. Therefore, this setting isn't the greatest for you now. We've got to shift and do this, or what's your vision of where you want to go? And you kind of see what it feels like. Because if you don't go out and you don't see them, then you come back and, an artist after a year goes, man, what are you doing? And, if you don't know what they're doing, you can get into that rut. It's like, man, I thought this worked. And it's like, yeah, it did a year and a half ago, but we've changed. Our approach is different. We're seeing a different audience reaction and that. So seeing that, and then there's a lot of value in just going out and hanging with the promoters and seeing things from their perspective. And, again, wow, this was a big win, and, be able to go out and talk business with them for other shows and other ideas. And so it's, a few times a month, we're doing that. We're doing showcases here in town, you name it. So, a lot of travel still. So 2 to 4 times a month. It's not I'm gone for a week and a half, but it's, a few nights here or there. We're out, still doing stuff on the road, but my job is done. Like, I'm not out booking shows or managing the night or something like that, but there's still plenty of things that, we do out on the road in the live setting.
So you go from really JRA's first intern to now you're senior agent. What happened? You're about to celebrate your 20 years at one place since college. That doesn't happen very often. So walk us through the journey.
Yeah, so we got back from the road in the summer. Jeff was doing a tour called Shout Fest at the time, and it was a weekend traveling festival that was going to go out in the fall. And so I got back sometime in August from being out on the road for a month. And Jeff had come in, and my internship was technically up. That was, it was all summer semester stuff. And so it was one of those, now you're kind of staring at each other going like, okay, so now what? And because I'm going, okay, I'm ready for more. Let's go do it. And so Jeff's, famous comment to me is, I was like, well, I guess I got to start paying you, right? I was like, yes, sir, that would be nice. And so we figured that out. And then again, Jeff at the time, he'd been an upstart since '83, doing a lot of himself to get it kicked off and rolling. And then they've been running and doing kind of a good mid-level agency at the time, but they're still figuring everything out too. And so it's still growing. It's, so they're still putting all the pieces together. And I realized, I moved down thinking like, oh yeah, all these businesses know exactly what they're doing. They've got programs, they've got structure and all that. And so we kind of look at each other and go, all right, so what do you do now? And, okay. And I got to write my own job description. Like, they've never had an agent assistant. What does that look like at DRA at the time?
Common misconception of, like, honestly, I would probably say most industries, but especially the music industry. You think all these companies that have been around forever know exactly what they're doing. We're all human. We're all adapting. Not necessarily the case that we all have this exact protocol of next steps. A lot of it is figuring it out as we go.
Yeah, and it really is, because people change, season change, everything adapts. So you have to be flexible. There's not a hard and fast rule. This is how it's done. And so that was kind of an interesting season, because here I am, because everything's moving so fast and I've got to come in and figure this out. So I'm an intern for whatever, 2-3 months. And then I got to figure out how to be an assistant and what are the needs here? What do we do? And so I start helping the agents with anything I know how to do. And it comes to fall tour time. And so Jeff's thinking, okay, I'll send this kid out in the weekends. And, it was going to be like a Wednesday. You have to leave on Wednesday, get back Sunday, and to be in the office a day or two a week. And all of a sudden, come tour time, the guys in the office are like, you can't send him out on the road. He's doing too much here. This is too, and I'm going, thank you. Like, thank you. That's what I needed. And was also kind of fulfilled that I need to be too valuable to let go. And that was my whole goal of walking in my first year, was going, I've got to make an impression to the point they can't let me go. And I was just like, oh, thank you. And so it worked. And so at the time we had 3 senior agents, and then we had a guy running the rock department. So we had probably 10 or 15 rock bands, and that ended up doing great business at the time. That was the youth culture of the day. So it there's a whole circuit you could run with those, and come later that year, I'm just inventing what I'm doing, figuring it out. And later that year, the rock agent left. And so Jeff looked at me and said, well, you ready to book bands? You ready to jump in? And, my heart of hearts was like, no, I don't really know what I'm doing. But, again, that naive bullheadedness was like, heck yeah, let's do this and let's figure it out. And so the responsibility of,
Jeff knew your experience. He knew what you had been involved with up to this point. So him asking you wasn't really saying, do you know enough to do this? It was just saying, I believe in you to do this. Are you on board?
yep, either that or the fact that nobody else is here. So when you're in the
That
house,
too?
let's put you to work. But so, being in the booking world, really you need, a couple years before you really get it figured out. If you're coming in with no experience and that, there's a couple years of, you got to book the show's got to play, you got to get the feedback, you got to try again. And that all takes a couple years to really, figure out your chops. And I'm brand new to everything, figuring this out in less than a year. And so he sat me down and said, hey, do you know why I called you? And I'm going, I just assume I'm a kid that sent a resume. You have interns in here all the time. I'm just dumbfounded with it. And he's just like, I never open resumes. And I'm going, okay, all right. And this one ended up on my desk. And he's like, I saw Ferris State University on there. And I'm going, okay. And he's like, I went to Ferris. I'm like, I had no idea. I knew some of Jeff's roots were in Michigan, and he'd come there, and that's where his dad grew up and had his band and stuff there. It's like I had no idea that Jeff had gone to the same school, and so he's just like, that first piqued my interest of like, what is Ferris State University doing in music business? And that was round one. And he's like, then I kept reading and saw that you had construction experience. And I'm going, huh? And he's like, the extreme games, I needed somebody, you're managing, these big packages that you've got to have the work ethic to be able to haul all this gear in and out of these trucks and set it up. And he's just like, man, it just seemed to line up. And he's like, I'll be honest, at the time, we could not find anybody to do that games role. Like, we were desperate. We needed to get somebody on the road. And here comes this dumb kid from Ferris that's got my attention that way and had construction experience and stuff in there. And I was just like, hey, why not? Let's give this kid a try. And so it was one of those things that at the right critical time, the Lord just kind of showed me, I have you here. You are specifically here for a purpose. And it was just one of those like, okay, I needed that reassurance at the time to go, yes, you are in way over your head, but I'm here. You can do this. And that was one of those moments just always go back to and just realize like, okay, Lord, you have put me here and specifically directed me. I was a dumb kid. I have no idea what I was doing. I knew enough to know that I didn't know much, and that was an asset, but you still, I'm not trying to play the system or know it. I'm just doing the best I can. And then you watch God working in those kind of details and then the behind the scenes, and just, it's humbling. It's flooring to realize that, man, Lord, you've got your plan, and it's going to go whether I know it or have any clue what I'm doing. You're going to do your thing. And yeah, so almost probably 4 or 5 different roles here at the company later, and changes here and there, and yeah, ended up I'm going to celebrate 20 years in June. So it's crazy to think about.
Well, first of all, congratulations on celebrating 20 years, June 1st, right?
Thank you. Yep, June 1st.
And I love that story because I think it's such a reminder of God knew what the desire of your heart was going to be before you did. And he ordained your steps in ways that you had no idea were being ordained for a future purpose at all. That's incredible. And I think so inspiring. I know for my story, and we're not here to talk about that, but my story, I mean, I worked at Ace Hardware, and that was all that was on my resume when I applied for an internship at Capitol. I had no experience except for, student concerts in college. And I went to a small school in Indiana that nobody had heard of, very similar. And my dad would always say, God knows your address. He knows exactly where you are, and he knows exactly where you're going. And, years later, here we are in Music City in Nashville, and God knew it all along, even if we couldn't see it. So I'm really inspired by your story. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's again, it just takes the testimony off of us. And it's the weird thing in the Christian walk that you have to both press forward and do what you know to do, use the resources you have in a reasonable manner. But then the flip side, you realize you have nothing to do with how the events end up being orchestrated and how it goes forth, and that's part of my job day to day is talking to people that are building events and that are figuring that stuff out as well. And so that's part of my job is to then counsel them. So there are a lot of church and ministry folks that you can run in and just stick with the business side of it, and like, hey, do this, you make money, do this, you won't, and all that. But then you realize, like, no, you're also building a ministry here, and how do we counsel you to support you to do this? And here's some of the things you got to do and try and go for it. But God's going to write your story. Like I'll use my common sense and tell you from my almost 20 years experience what I've seen happen. But God will do some crazy things that make me look stupid, and we'll still go like, see, I had it here. Other times I'll be right, and it'd be like, yeah, that was going to be a really bad idea. Thank you for talking me out of it. And so it's just one of those things. It's just the whole thing is just a stewardship of whatever resources God's given you. When it comes to talent, experience, opportunity, all that, everything has to fall through that lens of, okay, Lord, how can I best steward this? And then the results are up to you. And, I'll try to optimize, maximize, and do that. But sometimes he'll do stuff in spite of us. Sometimes he'll do stuff because of us. But that's what keeps it exciting in the Christian music world, is you just don't know. There's financial side, there's crowd size, there's ministry impact. And so some of the worst dates, I'll get pictures back from artists that are, just, you're ashamed of them. You just go, man, I'm so sorry, I blew it. And they're like, no, this was the sweetest time. And this person, we were called to be here at this time for this reason. And, so despite the horrendous circumstances that, would it be nightmarish? And I'm going, well, you're going to get fired, kind of thing. You find out like, no, there was an express purpose, for them to be there at that time. And so it's just, again, you've been here this long, you just kind of see enough of those things come up that you just go, okay, Lord, I'm just going to do my best to do my job, set things up, and then it's up to you. And your will would be done out there.
Well, and Jeff Roberts seems to be doing quite a great job in the industry. We call it JRA for short, Jeff Roberts Agency. But let's talk about y'all for a second, because you are arguably the biggest booking agency for Christian artists. You have people like this band right here, We the Kingdom, this awesome lady, Ann Wilson. You have Gable Price and Friends, Zach Williams, Katie Nicole, For King and Country, Bethel Music, Kane. Shall I go on? I mean, come on. Your roster is incredible. It has to take a lot of people to get all of the pieces together. What are some jobs within a booking agency that you may not initially think of? Like if I wanted to apply to a booking agency, what are some jobs I may see on the job board that's not just booking agent, which is the classic, what we hear of dialing, talking to promoters, talking to venues?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's surprisingly fewer than you would think. And that we're, oh goodness, I'd have to head count everybody, but we're probably a staff of 15, give or take over here. And half or less of those are agents out there working, because we've got some of the best admin folks out there that are running contracts and chasing deposits and making sure our systems are all working, that data's getting into our database and going in the proper direction, and policing that process. Because when you're doing thousands of dates, we need that machine all running. We need people that can come alongside of us and help out, that I can hand the ball off to and say, hey, we just got this offer in, can you get this going? Ask them about this question and that. So yeah, there's going to be admin that's going to be less in the intense booking world and more of the cleaning up the process side of things. There'll be agent assistants that get a little bit more into the world and down in the grinds, but may not have to be the ones that are holding the buck at the end of the day. And then there's the agents, that again, you'll have various focuses on some of the agents too, that some may handle a given territory, some may handle a certain group of artists. And here you're working on the developing artists, you're working on this part of the roster, or you're doing clubs, or you're doing churches and events, and so there's some variety there that can also take place. But at the end of the day, we're about getting shows in the books and trying to help launch artist careers and trying to keep on a watch on all of it. It's keeps you busy.
What do you look for when it comes to signing an artist to your agency?
I think for us, we're really honing in on someone that's got there's a relevance of music that has to be there, that's got a shot to work, either on a radio format, on a streaming platform, or through some sort of grassroots vehicle. And sometimes you can't tell what that is or is not going to be until you go meet with somebody, you figure it out, or you hear the music and go, ooh, okay, this could appeal to this audience and this could have an avenue here. Especially we're seeing more of those platforms arise that, it used to be, you've got to sell records, you got to have a top 10 radio hit all the time, or it's just not going to happen. And we're starting to see, streaming and other avenues are starting to open up places for artists to get, exposure. And like you mentioned, Gable Price is one that we may not hear them on a standard Christian radio station, but there's a buzz and a scene that's developing for them. So I think for us, we've just got to, and me personally, heart is so key, when we're talking and signing with artists, and that, we work with so many, great, successful bands and artists. But I think what I'm most proud of is everyone's heart for serving Christ and serving ministry in their unique angle. Ann Wilson is going to do it one way, King and Country is going to do it another. You've got John Cooper with Skillet, killing it out in the mainstream and, bringing Jesus into that world. You've got all these different ministry aspects in that. But as we talk to people, that heart, that's something I'm, so proud of our roster for, is you just look at all these different folks and realize, like, okay, I want to hear your alignment for God's calling, and just go, like, if you're here to be cool and have a good time, that's nice, but we're probably not the home for you. But if you've got a point, purpose, and a vision for, okay, I'm serving Christ in this lane, and this is where we're going. Some are called the general market, some are called the straight up church, some are called the women's ministries, and it's just figuring out what that is for the individual artist. And then, as we catch a vision for that, and that's, to me, that's the most exciting part. And you go, I see where this can go, and I see what we can do with this. couple that with the music that matters. Again, if it's great heart, terrible music, not going to have too long of a career. It's just not going to be the right fit. So we've got to have the mix of everything.
Are you more likely as an artist to get paired on a tour with artists signed to the same agency?
To a degree, I think so. I think for us, we're always looking at what's going to be the biggest win for the tour. We have to look at it through that lens. If X artist is just coming to me and saying, hey, who do I need to tour with? And all I do is present stuff for my roster and it's not good fits, then, it's going to get sniffed out pretty quick. And everybody's wondering like, well, what are we doing here? Are we trying to grow an artist that doesn't make any sense in this tour? And we would have to do that in the past at points. And, we just got to a point where we just realized, no, it just doesn't, we've got to find the right fit and we've got to find that. Now, being on a roster means that you're part of a lot of those active conversations. So when that overlap does occur and it says, oh, well, hey, we've got them open, we can speed this conversation along. And that makes a lot of sense so as long as it's within that framework and context of, yes, this does make sense for the greater whole of the tour. When it comes down to, well, we can do this artist, even a lot of the artists and managers will go, if there's synergy within my label family or within my agency family or my management family, I'm preferential of that than just some random somebody getting thrown on the bill.
Who would be a good fit as a booking agent?
Oh boy. I think you can have a few different drives to do this. And again, call of God is most important. So, that because the Lord can put you in circumstances where your personality is not the right fit, but he can open the doors and make that happen. And I've seen that work through myself, through other folks that it's like, yeah, you're not what I would call material for this, but it's working because, the Lord's called you to do this. So I think for me, what drives me is the ministry front of what we do. I'm very detail oriented. I like to see a project through completion. I enjoy the planning phase of everything and pulling it together. I enjoy the relationships out there with the church community, the festival buyers, the promoters, all the folks that I work with. Again, there's just so much like-mindedness that, it just feels like we're striving towards a similar goal. And I'm just so grateful to be involved in that side of things. So, I think personality-wise, I'm less outgoing, and that's to my detriment in this position. But I try to make up for it in work ethic and heart and vision and planning and that. And there's definitely a role for me to serve here within that realm. I think a killer agent is just going to be somebody that is Mr. or Miss happening, can, initiate conversations, can get people interested in, man, have you thought about this idea? And what do you think about stacking this together? And that, because we're generating a lot of ideas and interest. And that's the whole point is as you get on the phone with somebody, they may not know what they even want. And they're just going, I think I want to do a live something. Wow, have you thought about this? Have you, so as you listen and take in what they're doing, being able to throw out, well, what about this idea or put this together? Oh, really? Oh, we could do that? And so we're constantly doing that. I think by nature, if you don't want to have a heart attack by the time you're 40, you had better be emotionally flexible and tolerant, because people will often ask, this has got to be your dream job. Like you've got to just love it every day and it's amazing. And I'm going, it depends on the day. You'll get a day where I'll 100% agree with you, and you'll get a day where I'll tell you to run and hide, don't ever do this. And it's just that constant roller coaster. And those days can go side by side. You can have your best day right next to your worst day. And you just never know what circumstances are coming your way. And so just the ability to see the long term. It's no different than watching your retirement account. And if you sat there and watched it day to day, you just have a heart attack. It would just drive you nuts. Like, oh, I'm up 10 grand or I'm down 80. Like, what happened? And that. And so you just got these valleys and troughs, and just having that, like, okay, I'm called to do this. I'm here. This is who I am. This is what I want to do. We'll get you through and we'll stabilize and make that a more even thing. But you just have to be ready for, you never know, what issue or what thing is going to come up or what victory is around the corner. We might sign something that's spectacular, or some artist has a big breakout something, or sells out this arena. You just have no idea. And that you do your best, but, so it's just being tolerant of those ups and downs, I think, is key. I've seen a lot get discouraged because they come in thinking, oh, I've nailed my dream job, and then have, a string of terrible days and go, yeah, it was awful for a week, but hang in there, it'll get better. And, so being able to handle discouragement, I think, is a huge thing, and be able to step up the next day and go, okay, today's different. Let's go figure out how we can make it happen today.
Emotional resilience sounds really, really important for what you do. And you kind of already answered my last question. I always wrap this podcast with asking our guest, are you living the dream?
Depends on the day. So, yep. No, it's one of those. I'm so grateful to have this opportunity to work in the community here that I get to work in the Christian music industry is large, but also, here at Jeff Roberts, can't ask for better bosses and employers and stuff here. Their heart for serving the Lord is just tremendous, and demonstrated in how they lead and run the company. Again, that speaks to, if somebody sticks around 20 years, it's because I'm either crazy or, something's working. And so I'm grateful to be a part of that. But yeah, I think to an extent, I just go back to that reassurance of calling and just going, okay, God has called me to be here. He's opened this door. Someday God may call me to leave. That's the thing with the Christian faith. You just never know. The Lord could send me to Africa tomorrow, and I've got to pack this thing up and fly out, and season's over. And, you got to be okay with that. And I am. That may come. And so it's just that constant testing. I've got because of the way the Lord designed the circumstance to get here, I've got that assurance to go, okay, I will push through adversity until, God, you have made a clear door out, or a clear calling out to say, yes, your season's over. I've got something else for you to go do. Otherwise, the last place I know he called me to be was here. And okay, Lord, until you have something else for me, here I stay. And we're going to do the best we can and get through it. And if circumstances or a specific calling direct me somewhere else, then so be it. We'll follow it at that time. But 19 and a half years later, we're still here. So
it says a lot about Jeff Roberts Agency that you've been there almost 20 years. Thank you so much, Tom, for your time and for sharing your story with us. What an incredible, incredible story it is. Thanks for listening to the Springboard Music Podcast. If there's something that resonated with you in this episode, or an episode that you would like for us to create in the future, please do not hesitate to reach out to us at Springboard Music on Instagram.